Hi, this is Todd Blankenship with RocketStock.com, and I'm going to show you some examples of how to use the elements from our interface heads-up display elements pack and show you how quickly you can create really highly detailed animations and looks in a very short period of time. All of these elements are pre-keyed elements, so they all have alpha channels already built into them, and they are all in .mov format, so you'll need to make sure that you have the most up-to-date QuickTime Player installed. And a good portion of these elements are infinitely loopable. So what that means is you'll have an in clip, a loop clip, and an out clip. And as you'll see, this is just a really big pack with tons of different options. There's over 400 elements in here, so you can really just have a lot of fun. So let's get started with an example of how to use the interface elements in Premiere to composite some cool stuff on this computer screen here. So we have this clip of this guy sitting in front of the screen here, and we want to use the interface elements to fill up the screen. First, let's create a sequence by grabbing our clip here and dragging it onto the new item button, and that's just going to create a new sequence. And now what we want to do is create a color matte. So let's go to the new item button, click that, and let's select color matte. And 1920 by 1080 is going to work, so let's click OK. And let's select a color that's really easy to see. I'm just going to drag it down here, select this bright red, hit OK. And let's just name this screen. So now we have our color matte up here in our project bin. Let's just drag it onto our sequence, extend it to the length of the clip. And now to help us keep everything organized later on, let's nest this. So we're going to right click on it, select nest, and let's call that screen content. And now we need to fit this nested color matte to the edges of the screen. So we're going to use a corner pin effect. So type in corner pin over here in the effects panel. And now just drag that onto the nested color matte. If you have the nest selected, you can come up to effects controls, and there we have corner pin. Just click on that. And now you see we have these 4 nodes on each corner. So now what we're going to do is move each node to the corners of the screen. And you just want to make sure to cover up all of the white part as close as possible. So now that we have our screen layer created, we can actually create the screen itself. So double click on the screen content nested layer there. And here we have our color matte again. And just drag that to the bottom. And let's just fill that with a ramp effect. So go over to our effects panel, type in ramp, and just drag that onto the color matte. Now we want to change the ramp shape to a radial ramp. And on the start color, let's just select kind of a dark greenish blue, kind of teal, something like that to match our shot. And on the end color, let's just select a very similar color, but much darker, almost black. And now let's turn up the ramp scatter. I usually use it quite a bit, something like 250. And then click on it, and let's move these nodes so that the brighter side of the ramp is on the right side of the screen and the darker side is on the left. So now if we go back to our original clip, there you see our screen is taking shape. And now we can use the elements from our interface pack to build out our screen. So we have all these different categories of elements. I'm going to start with some code. And you just drag it into the sequence here. And there we go. And to move it around, you just click on the clip and go to Effects Controls, click on the motion there, and you get this little bounding box. You can move it around however you like. So I'm going to put some code up here in this corner, and I'm just going to use a couple more of those code elements. And now you can really just kind of have some fun and just build whatever look supports your scene. And some of these elements are actually looping elements that you can make as long as you need them to be. So what you'll have there is an in clip, a loop clip, and an out clip. So if you wanted to loop these clips in Premiere, the way that you would do it is just drag in the in clip, and what that's going to do is it's going to animate it on right there. And then you're going to use the loop clip. And if you wanted to extend it, all you have to do is click on the loop element there and hold down the Alt key and drag it, and that'll create a copy, and you can just match it up to the end there. And then you have the option to have it animate out by using the out clip. And whenever you have these elements where there's multiple clips there, just to keep things organized a little bit easier to move them around, I just like to nest it. So just select them all, select nest. We're going to call this radar. And now we have it as one element that we can move around independently. So most of these elements have a slight blue tint to them. So let's say you wanted to change the color. One of the easiest ways to do this is by using a color balance effect. So just type in color balance. Let's go for hue, lightness, and saturation and just drag it onto the clip itself. And now you can just change this hue slider here to whatever color you like. So I'm going to go with kind of a neon green there, something right in there. So if we come back here, we can see our screen is really starting to take some shape here. So now I'm just going to build out the rest of the screen. Okay, so here's the screen that I've created. So as you can see, it kind of starts with this loading bar and then some stuff pops up, and it's just a lot of detail, a lot of cool stuff that you can play around with. I changed the color on some of these elements, got some code elements, got some graph elements. And so now when we go back to our original shot here, we can see it's all showing up. So all we have to do is just kind of do some light color correction and just kind of make everything blend a bit better. So I'm going to grab a lumetri effect from the effects bin and just drag it onto our screen content layer here. And I'm just going to bring down the shadows, just start creating a little bit more contrast. And I'm going to bump up the whites a decent amount, just so it looks a little bit brighter. And I'm noticing the screen itself looks a little bit green, so I'm going to come down to curves here. And I'm going to select the green channel, and I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. There, that looks like it matches a little bit better. And here's the clip that we ended up with. Another thing that I want to note really quick is how easy it is to change the frame rate of these elements. So they all come stock as 29.97 frames per second. So let's say your project is in 23.976 frames per second. So all you'd have to do is just select the elements that you're using, right click, and then go to Modify, Interpret Footage. And here it's assume this frame rate. You would just type in the frame rate of your project. So say it was 23.976. You just type that in, hit OK, and there you go. And using the interface elements in Final Cut is going to be very similar to using them in Premiere. So we have the same clip right here, and we're going to go to our generator, and we're going to create a gradient. Just drag that onto our timeline there. We'll just make it the length of our clip, use the cut tool, and just cut off that little extra piece there. So let's change the parameters up here. So we're going to go from a linear ramp to a radial. We're going to select that kind of green, dark blue there on the start color there. And then for the second color, let's just choose the same type of thing, but much darker. And I'm going to go ahead and darken that one a little bit more. And then let's just change the positioning. Put the brighter side over on the right and the darker side over here. What we're going to do is we're going to create a compound clip. So we're going to right click on our gradient layer there. And let's say new compound clip. Let's just call this screen content. And then now we can double click on that and create our screen. And just like in Premiere, you're able to loop these elements for as long as you'd like. So we're going to drag in the in clip here, and we're going to do the loop clip. And if you want to duplicate your clip, you can just click on it, hold down the Alt key, and drag, and it'll create a copy. And you just match it up to the end there. And you can make as many copies as you like. And you can change the color of these elements by just grabbing a hue and saturation effect, and just change the hue angle here. And we want to make sure that that same effect is applied to our other clips. So I'm going to select a clip there. I'm going to go up to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to select our other two clips here. I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to select Paste Effects. So now it's all the same color. And then if you want to continue to keep everything organized, you can also just keep creating compound clips. So I'm going to select that Portal 1 loop clip, and I'm going to say New Compound Clip. We're going to call that Portal 1. And so now it's just one element that we can move around. So I'm going to reposition things and just start building out our screen here. So I've spent some time making a screen animation using some of the elements right here. I've changed the color on a couple of them. And I'm going to select our screen content layer, and I'm going to come up here to this corner and change from the transform tool to the distort tool. And now we can move these corners around to the edges of our screen. Again, we're just covering up the white part. And there you go. I'm just going to change the contrast a little bit with a color correction effect. Just drag that right onto the clip. Going to go over to the color board here. And I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast using the exposure here. Okay, that looks pretty good. And the color, I think we need to pull out just a little bit of the green. And there's what we got. Okay, so now let's look at how we can use these elements inside of After Effects. What we have here is this clip of my buddy Logan here. He's looking around, kind of talking a little bit, and we're going to use this clip and elements from our interface pack to create the classic Iron Man heads-up display kind of look. So first we'll click on the clip here, and we're going to drag it down to a new composition. So you're going to drag it right here on this little icon, and now we have our comp. And what we need to do now is track his eye movement. Right-click down here, go to New, select Null Object, and let's rename this null object by hitting the Enter key, and let's type eye track. And now we're going to track his eye movement. So let's click on the footage here, go up to our tracker, and select Track Motion. So here we want to track the position and the rotation, and I'm going to move the tracker points to the very bottoms of his pupil here. And I'm going to go ahead and widen the feature region as well as the search region, just a hair. And next what I want to do, which is really important here, is I'm going to come into the options and I'm going to switch it from luminance to RGB. And that's because I think it might see the difference in color here rather than the luminance channel. A little bit easier. I also want to make sure that here stop tracking is selected, and I like to keep the confidence level to about 80. That way if the tracker's having trouble finding the next frame, we can go ahead and do it ourselves. So hit OK. And now we're going to go ahead and analyze forward. So right there it stopped. So what that means is that the tracker couldn't confidently guess where the tracking point of that frame was. So we're going to go ahead and put it in place ourselves. So as we know, we put it right in the middle of his pupil there. We'll just move that one down as well. And now we have it back in place. Let's hit Analyze Forward again. Okay, right there, stopped again. All we have to do, nudge it right back into place, the bottom, middle of his pupil there. Analyze forward, okay. And we just keep doing that until we have the full track. All right, so there we go. Now I want to go ahead and make sure that the target is set to the eye track null, which it is. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to hit Apply. So now we have a null object that's tracked to his eye movement specifically. So now I'm going to create a 3D version of this eye track null so that I can keep the old one there just in case I need it. So I'm going to right click, go to New, select Null Object, and then I'm going to click on this little box right here, which will make it 3D. And I'm going to kind of move it just a little bit higher, just a little closer to his eye region there. And then I'm going to parent this layer to our eye track layer. I'm going to hit Enter there, and I'm just going to rename it eye track 3D. And now I'm going to click on the null and hit P for position. I'm going to push it very far forward in Z space. Keep dragging the Z position out. I just want it real big because I want these eye movements to be pretty exaggerated with whatever we put there. So now when he moves his eyes around, you can see that it kind of goes pretty far from one side of the screen to the other. And now I want to track his head movement. So we can have certain elements move to his eyes and certain elements move to his head movement. So I'm going to create another null object. Go to New, Null Object. I'm going to rename this one Head Track. And so now we just need to track his head movement. So I'm going to click on the footage layer again, come up to the tracker, track motion, same deal. We want to track the position and the rotation. And I think the best spot to track is probably going to be his eyebrows. So I'm going to come up here and just kind of find the edge of his eyebrows versus his head there. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. Just kind of try to find an area of contrast. This movement's going to be a lot more subtle. Let's go ahead and just change our null, make sure it's set to head track here. And in our options, I'm going to change from the RGB channel to luminance because it's more of a contrast-based track. And let's analyze forward. And now that we have our track there, let's just hit Apply. Hit OK. You can go ahead and make the head track layer 3D as well. So now we have all these null objects and we can use that to create the 3D movement. Now I'm going to go ahead and start building our heads-up display. We have all kinds of these elements here. I'm going to start with some targets just because that seems appropriate for his eye. And as you'll see, we have the in clip, the loop clip, and the out clip. So let's just see what we got. This one looks pretty cool. So we're going to tie that to his eye movement. And the quickest way to create a new comp with all three of these objects in there is to select all three and we're going to drag it down to a new comp button. Okay, and now it gives us this option box here, and we're going to make sure single composition is selected, and we're also going to click sequence layers, and we're not going to have any overlap. So now when we come in here, we have our whole comp here set up. So I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to drag this target layer right here. So we kind of want this to be positioned around where his eye is looking. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a 3D layer, and I'm going to parent that layer to the eye track 3D layer because I want it to be tied to his eye movement. And now I'm going to move it really far forward in Z space, just like that other element. Okay, so let's see how that looks. And it's just kind of one of those things you need to just work on it till the position looks natural. Okay, so this right here looks pretty good for that one. And let's go ahead and give him another target for the other eye. So as you go through these elements, I just kind of like to click on the loop one because that's just going to show you where it's going to end up animation-wise. And this one looks pretty cool to me. So let's add that in. I'm going to select all three. I'm going to drag to the new comp button, same settings, and select OK. And we want it to be in a very similar 3D space as this target. So I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to duplicate by clicking on the layer and go to Edit, Duplicate, or you can hit Command D. And you're going to click on that layer and hold down the Alt key and drag your new target layer in. That's going to put it in the exact same spot. And drag it just to the left a little bit, okay? Obviously, that's a little bit too big, so we're going to scale that down by hitting the S key, scale it down. And again, we just want to kind of move it around till it looks natural. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So one problem is that our second target is actually not as long as our comp here. So the thing that's really nice about when you use these loopable elements is you can make it as long as you want. So let's go into our target 3 layer and let's just lengthen it a little bit. I'm going to go up to composition, composition settings, and let's just make this a little bit longer. So right now it's 5 seconds. Let's just go ahead and make it 10 for now. So now we have a little bit more time to work with here. So let's click on the loop layer, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the loop layer. So we're going to hit Command D again, and let's do it one more time. We're going to select the bottom 2 and just drag it to the end here and just make sure that it matches up. Let's drag the next one over. And then we're going to end it out with our outro. And there we go. Now we have our longer target layer there. And so now another thing that you might want to do is change the color of some of these elements. Most of the elements in this pack have this neon kind of blue look to them. So let's say we wanted to change this outline here to be a different color. All you need to do is create a new adjustment layer. So right click and select new adjustment layer. And let's go up here and select our rectangle tool and just select this middle crosshair kind of thing here. We want to leave that the same color. So now we've created a mask on this adjustment layer. Let's go ahead and invert it and go up to Effect, Generate, Fill. And so now it's kind of a red. Let's make it sort of an orange, just like that. So now the middle crosshair is still blue and the outside is orange. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and build out the rest of the heads-up display. I'm going to go ahead and start with some code. And I'm going to position it kind of up here. Go ahead and make it a 3D layer. And we're going to go ahead and parent that layer to our head track layer. And so I want to go ahead and rotate this in 3D space so that it kind of looks more like it's being projected on a sphere. So I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis a little bit outward like that. And I'm going to take the x-axis and just tilt it ever so slightly like that. We're also going to push it forward in Z space like we did with the other elements. And I'm going to add a couple more. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag down Code 2 element and just move that down a bit. And let's push that forward some more so that we just have some more parallax. And I'm going to scale it down and push it a little bit more forward. Now I'm going to add a graph element. I like this one here. So I'm going to take all three, drag them to the new comp just like before. Sequence, single composition, hit OK. And let's just drag that right in. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate the code layer. And I'm going to hold down Alt key, drag it right down on top. And let's scoot that down a little bit. And since this one's on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and change the rotation there so that it's more tilted forward, kind of like that, on the x-axis there. So now you can really just go crazy and just start adding elements as you see fit for your particular scene. So now I'm just going to go through the interface pack and just start adding elements where they seem like they'll look cool and see where we end up. So I'm just throwing some of these elements together and just kind of moving them around in 3D space just like this. I have a radar over here, a graph, this little portal on this side, this other graph here. I want to change the color of this graph specifically, so I'm going to click on it. I'm going to create an adjustment layer, and I'm just going to select the pen tool up here and just going to kind of select this shape here. And I'm going to select that adjustment layer, go to Effect, select Fill again, and let's change that to that kind of orangish color again. There we go. And now let's go ahead and make sure that all of our layers here have motion blur turned on. So select them all, click this right here, and that's going to turn on motion blur for all those layers, and then we got to turn it on for the comp. So turn it on right up there. And another thing that I want to do is have all of these elements that are off to the side be a little bit blurrier. I want to add a little bit of depth of field kind of an effect. Everything that is tied to the head track layer, which is going to be these top layers, I'm going to select those. I'm going to go to Effect, go to Blur, Gaussian Blur, and let's go ahead and set that to something like 8. So now I want to add some glow to everything. So we're going to select all of our element layers. Let's go up to Effect, select Glow. So let's turn up the radius pretty high. And let's also turn up the intensity of the glow just a little bit, probably 1.5. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a new adjustment layer over the top of the whole thing and just do a little bit of a curves adjustment. So we're going to go to Color Correction, Curves. And I'm going to bump up the highs there a little bit, and let's crush down the blacks just a little bit. And so after playing with the glow a little bit and the colors of some of the elements and stuff, here's what we ended up with. And if you're an advanced After Effects user or motion graphics designer, we've actually included the source files and the project file in here as well. And when you open that project up, you'll see that there are already a bunch of different compositions open, one for each category of elements. So we have circles, EQs. So if you go into each of these comps, you can actually click on this adjustment layer here and go up to Effect Controls, and you can actually change the color for all of the elements in that category. So if you wanted to change all the colors of all the graphs, you could go into the Graphs Colors composition, click on this adjustment layer, and right here in Effect Controls, you'll see you can change that to whatever you want. So let's just change it to a green here and a red, Christmas style. And then when you open up any of the graphs, you'll see that that change has taken effect. And another cool thing is that we've added this music composition here. And what you can do is you can actually use this composition to drive the animation of some of your elements like these EQs. And all you have to do is just drag a track into that composition. So let's just drag this one right here, put it in there. And now the animation of these equalizer elements are going to go along with the music. And after you have your colors set however you like them, you can just find whatever element you want and just open up the composition here. And all of the design elements are right in here, so you can just change it however you like. So yeah, this After Effects project file includes everything you need to access the source files of all of the elements. And these are just a few examples of how you can use these elements in Premiere, Final Cut, and After Effects. It's a very extensive collection with over 400 elements, so definitely spend some time and explore the different folders and see what's in there. And if you have any questions or issues at all, feel free to contact our support staff. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And be sure to check out RocketStock.com and take a look at some of our other video element packs that we have up there for sale. And keep an eye out for some more packs that will be added soon.